Know what it feels like to be hunted, human. And know that it is the last thing you will ever feel.
If you grew up on the 90s cartoons, you probably remember Gargoyles as that show. You know the one. The Disney afternoon lineup was usually all bright colors, silly animal sidekicks, and feel-good life lessons at the end of every episode. And then, out of nowhere, came Gargoyles. It just felt different. The tone was darker, the stakes felt heavier, and it didn't pull its punches. This wasn't your average Saturday morning cartoon. It was intense, sometimes violent, and honestly, a little disturbing. Looking back now, it's kind of wild that Disney even made this show, because Gargoyles wasn't just another cartoon to pass the time after school. It was basically a gothic tragedy wrapped in animation, complete with death, betrayal, and storylines that were way more Shakespeare than Mickey Mouse. And here's the crazy part. The deeper you revisit it as an adult, the more you realize this might actually be the darkest thing Disney has ever produced. And hey, before we dive into the really disturbing stuff Disney probably wishes we'd all forget, if you'd love this show as a kid and you want to watch it again today, I've got the DVDs linked right down in the description. It hits so different as an adult, trust me. And if you want to help me keep making these deep dives, you can always drop a super thanks here on the video. It really does go a long way, and I appreciate every single one of you who does. So with that said, let's kick things off with one of the moments that stuck with so many of us as kids, and probably gave more than a few of us nightmares. I'm talking about Demona's transformation.
When we're this close together, mon chéri, we feel each other's pain. It's part of a magical pact we avowed long ago.
When most of us think back to magical transformations in cartoons, the first thing that comes to mind is usually something fun and exciting. Like, you remember He-Man putting the sword in the air and saying, "I have the power," right? Even She-Ra's morphing sequence with sparks and flashes. You just knew she was about to save the day. Those moments were always upbeat, almost celebratory. They made you feel pumped up, like you were part of the magic yourself. But then there was Demona, and her transformation, that was something else entirely. It wasn't beautiful, it wasn't empowering, it was downright terrifying. Every single day, this character was cursed to shift between human and gargoyle, and the show did not sugarcoat it. Her body would contort in these unnatural ways, her bones cracking, her skin stretching and tearing as if it couldn't contain what was inside of her. And the worst part? She didn't glide through it gracefully or silently. She screamed in pain every time. It wasn't heroic. It was pure body horror. Now, think about this for a second. This is Disney we're talking about. The same company that gave us Aladdin, DuckTales, Goof Troop, and here they were, showing us a woman writhing in agony while her flesh ripped itself apart. If you watched it as a kid, you probably didn't even fully process what you were seeing, but you felt it. There was something about those scenes that just made you squirm a little, something that stuck in the back of your mind. And the older you get, the more you realize just how messed up that imagery really was. And here's what makes it even darker. Demona's transformation wasn't just a cool special effect, it carried weight. It meant something. Her curse was basically eternal suffering. She could never find peace, never really belong in either world. She wasn't fully human, but she wasn't fully gargoyle either. Every day was a reminder that she was trapped, broken, and in pain.
So far, my plans have always been thwarted, one after the other. But tonight, I take control.
It's almost like an allegory for trauma or alienation. Imagine living with something inside you that constantly tears you apart, keeps you from fitting in anywhere, and reminds you of your own mistakes. Thinking back on it now, I have no idea how it made it past the censors in the 90s. Most Disney shows at the time gave us villains who slipped on banana peels or got caught in their own traps. But here we were watching a character literally suffer on screen in a way that felt more at home in a horror movie. And the thing is, Gargoyles didn't just show it once and move on. This was her life. It happened over and over. Every time you saw it, you were reminded of the torment she lived with. And here's the wild part. Kids back then might not have understood the deeper themes, but they absolutely felt them. That's why so many people who grew up on Gargoyles still remember Demona so vividly. She wasn't just the bad guy. She was a tragic, tortured soul, and that transformation made you feel her pain whether you wanted to or not.
Face me, human, if you dare.
Looking back as an adult, you can see the layers that were there all along. You realize, oh wow, this wasn't just a cartoon villain turning into a monster. This was a metaphor for trauma, identity, and eternal punishment. But when you were a kid, all you knew was that something about it made you uneasy. And that's the genius and the horror of Gargoyles. It slipped these heavy, almost nightmarish ideas into a show that was airing right alongside the Rescue Rangers and Darkwing Duck. And believe it or not, this was just the tip of the iceberg. Because if Demona's transformation made you uneasy, what came next in Gargoyles wasn't just unsettling, it was outright devastating. And it left a scar on the story, and on us as viewers, that you never really forget. I'm talking about the Massacre of the Wyvern Clan.
What are you doing? Hold it. Let's just let them play out their little drama, shall we?
Back in the 90s, most cartoons had this unspoken contract with the audience. Don't worry, nobody's really gonna get hurt. Violence was there, sure, but it was safe violence. You'd see a quick laser blast zipping across the screen, maybe a sword clash, or a pratfall where a bad guy trips over his own fate. And by the time the credits rolled, everybody would dust themselves off, smile, and maybe even laugh about it. That was the rhythm. That was the comfort zone. But Gargoyles wasn't interested in playing by those rules. It shattered that illusion in one of the boldest and most shocking storylines I've ever seen in kids animation. The Massacre of Wyvern Clan. And honestly, even now, it still gives me chills just thinking about it. The way they presented it was brutal. The Gargoyles we were introduced to, the ones we thought were going to be part of this big ongoing story, they weren't captured, they weren't frozen in time, and they didn't escape with some last-minute plot twist. They were slaughtered, cold-blooded, merciless, final. Their stone bodies, which should have been their protection during the day, turned into their coffins, smashed into pieces while they were helpless, asleep, and completely unaware of what was happening around them. And the survivors? They didn't wake up to an epic fight scene where they could charge into battle and save the day. No, they woke up to silence, rubble, and grief. And that grief was raw. It wasn't cartoon grief where somebody frowns for 30 seconds before bouncing back into the adventure. No, Goliath's despair was heavy. He didn't just lose his clan, he lost his family. He lost everything, and the show made us sit with that.
You are trespassing.
You could hear the weight in his voice, see it in his body language. It was one of those moments that stuck with you as a kid, even if you didn't even have the words of why it was so hard. Because really, what other child-friendly Disney show at the time would even touch something like this? Think about it. Goof Troop was about silly antics between Goofy and Max. DuckTales was treasure hunts and slapstick villains. Even Darkwing Duck, which had a little bit of an edge, always wrapped things up with humor. But Gargoyles gave us a genocide storyline, straight up murder, a permanent loss that wasn't undone by magic or a convenient twist. The Wyvern Clan was gone, dead, forever. And that permanence was shocking. As kids, we were so used to everything resetting by the next episode. You know, like, oh no, the bad guy just got away this time. Better luck next week. But in Gargoyles, actions had consequences. This one event wasn't just a dramatic scene. It left a scar that drove the rest of the series. It shaped Goliath, it shaped Demona, and it changed the tone of the entire story. Looking back now, it feels surreal that this was airing right alongside the lighter Disney afternoon lineup. Imagine finishing up an episode of Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers and then immediately tuning into Gargoyles, where your favorite characters were being wiped out in a massacre. It didn't feel like the same universe. It felt like someone had snuck in a show from a completely different network.
These cliffs were our home ages before they built their stone fortress. They should bow to us.
One that didn't care about softening the blow for kids. And maybe that's why this scene burned itself into so many of our memories. It was more than just shocking. It was a wake-up call. Gargoyles was telling us, this isn't just a game. This world has stakes. These characters can die. And that level of seriousness just wasn't something we were used to as kids. You can't watch the Massacre and then look at Gargoyles the same way again. Honestly, this moment alone would have been enough to set Gargoyles apart from every other cartoon on the block. It was tragic, it was brutal, and it was unforgettable. But the crazy part? The show didn't stop there. As devastating as it was to see the Wyvern Clan destroyed, that was just the beginning. The writers were only warming up. Because if you thought a Massacre was the darkest thing Gargoyles had in store, well, wait until you see what Demona had planned. Her obsession with wiping out humanity didn't just make her a villain, it made her one of the most terrifying characters ever created for kids' TV. Demona wasn't like the typical cartoon villains we grew up with. She wasn't chasing after bags of money, trying to outsmart some goofy hero, or competing in some over-the-top scheme to reset itself every week. No, Demona's goals were on another level, and honestly, way darker than anything we were used to seeing after school.
Spare me your righteous outrage, Macbeth. I know you would have betrayed me and my kind to win the approval of the English.
Her mission wasn't power or fame or treasure. It was simple and chilling. She wanted to wipe out humanity, not defeat them, not to enslave them, not to inconvenience them. She wanted to erase them entirely. And the show didn't hold back. More than once, Demona made actual attempts at genocide. She cooked up plans to release deadly viruses, conjured up magical plagues, and activated doomsday-level weapons designed to wipe out every last human being on Earth. That's not me exaggerating. That's literally what she set out to do. And remember, this wasn't some late-night adult cartoon. This was Disney. This was airing alongside commercials for fruit roll-ups and Happy Meal toys. Kids came home from school, turned on the TV expecting another fun adventure, and were greeted with a villain plotting world-ending terrorism. And what really made it hit harder was the way Demona's hatred was portrayed. It wasn't silly or over the top like most cartoon bad guys. She didn't cackle every 5 seconds or twirl a mustache like a parody villain. Her rage was personal, it was bitter, it came from a place of pain and betrayal that went all the way back to the massacre of her clan. She was consumed by grief and anger, and the writers didn't shy away from showing how trauma can twist someone until all they see is vengeance. She wasn't just bad for the sake of being bad, she was broken. And here's the thing, as kids in the 90s, a lot of us didn't fully understand it at the time. But even without realizing it, you could feel how different she was. She scared you in a way that other cartoon villains didn't, because she mirrored something we were starting to see creep into the real world.
You tricked me! You had me under a spell! None of this was my fault! It was the humans! Always the humans!
The news at the time was filled with stories about terrorism, about violence driven by hate, about people so blinded by vengeance they didn't care who got hurt. And here was Demona embodying all of that in a Disney cartoon. Looking back now, it's actually kind of shocking this even made it past Disney executives. But somehow it did, and millions of kids saw it. And the wildest part, those moments where she tried to unleash viruses or destroy humanity weren't even her darkest chapters. Because as terrifying as those plots were, there came a storyline that went even deeper, even more disturbing, and honestly left a scar on the series forever. If you thought Demona trying to kill humanity was heavy, wait until you remember what went down in Hunter's Moon. The Hunter's Moon trilogy was the kind of finale that made you realize Gargoyles wasn't just playing around anymore. Most shows wrapped up with some big battle where the good guys win, the bad guys slink away, and you roll into the credits with a smile. But Hunter's Moon? Nah. This storyline was about something much heavier. Hatred. Not the cartoon kind where a villain says, "I'll get you next time," but real, violent, generational hatred. The Hunters weren't goofy henchmen or bumbling comic relief bad guys. They weren't slipping on banana peels or arguing over who was in charge. They were executioners. Their entire purpose in life was to track Goliath and his clan through the city with one goal: wipe them out. Exterminate them, period. And the show made sure you understood that. They were armed to the teeth with weapons, explosives, and the prejudice so deep it practically oozed off the screen. And the violence? It wasn't sanitized the way you'd expect from Disney. Buildings came crashing down, civilians were put in danger, and for a while, it genuinely felt like the Gargoyles might not make it. I mean, as kids, we weren't used to shows actually putting the heroes at risk like this. Usually, you always knew deep down that everything would be fine. But here, you weren't so sure. And then there was Elisa Maza. She wasn't a gargoyle, she wasn't invincible. She was just a human, and she got caught right in the middle of all that hatred. When she was nearly killed, it felt personal. You didn't just worry about her as a character, you felt the gut punch of how hate doesn't just stop at its intended target, it spills over. It hurts everyone in its path. Watching that as a kid was nightmare fuel. This wasn't about fantasy monsters anymore, it was about racism. It was about prejudice. It was about hate crimes only dressed up in the form of a Disney cartoon. And honestly, that's why Hunter's Moon sticks with so many people even now. It was dark, it was brutal, and it was a reminder that not every story ends with a laugh track or a happy little lesson. Sometimes hatred just destroys. But even with all of that, Gargoyles wasn't finished pushing boundaries, because Demona's story, which was already one of the darkest things Disney had ever put on TV, took an even more disturbing turn. It became something so symbolic and so heavy that most kids missed it completely. And even as adults, a lot of people don't realize just how dark it really was. Which leads us to the final question. Why did Disney bury Gargoyles? For a show that was so unique, so well written, and so unforgettable, Gargoyles never got the same love as other Disney properties. The merchandise was minimal. Reruns disappeared quickly, and the show was quietly pushed to the sidelines. Why? Because Disney realized it didn't fit their brand. It was too dark, too violent, too disturbing.
Fight, men! They are not invincible!
The very thing that made it groundbreaking are the same things Disney wanted to hide. And yet, here we are decades later, remembering it not just as another cartoon, but as a legend. Gargoyles was the show that dared to go darker, dared to disturb, and dared to scar us in ways that no Saturday morning cartoon ever should have. So now I have to ask you, which moment from Gargoyles disturbed you the most? Was it Demona's body horror transformation, the massacre of the Wyvern Clan, or maybe the genocide attempts that felt all too real? Let me know in the comments, because I'll be featuring some of the best ones in an upcoming video. If you want to relive the series yourself, I've linked the Gargoyles DVDs and comics down below. Trust me, they hit even harder as an adult. And if you've enjoyed this deep dive into Disney's darkest cartoon, you can help me making videos like this by dropping a super thanks right here on YouTube. It really does make a difference, because in the world of Gargoyles, the night belongs to us. See you next time.